What's going on, everybody? I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it's kind of a hell of a day to talk ball. No, I mean it's still a hell of a day to talk ball, but joining me to do just that, as we are two men dealing with our feelings right now, because we are live here at 5 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, and we are literally getting breaking news right now that Tucker Kraft. Okay, by the way, joining me to do that is Justin Boone. Hey, Justin, how you doing, buddy? A man in mourning with me potentially for this Tucker Kraft injury that is happening right as we're about to go live here.
Yeah, this is a rough one. And, you think you live a good life. You think you're not hurting anybody. You're doing everything properly. And yet bad things still happen to you. And I can't tell you the amount of people that have reached out to thank me and to actually thank you as well.
I know. Yes.
For advising them to take Tucker Kraft and having him on so many teams and, enjoying the fruits of that in the first couple weeks of the season. And yet now, out of nowhere, midweek, he suffers this injury. And we don't know exactly what the diagnosis is, but when they're already saying they don't think it's season ending, I don't think he's going to be out there for at least a few weeks, if not much, much longer than that. It's a terrible situation here on a team that, he was emerging as potentially the number one pass catcher on that team, which is what we want for any fantasy tight end, right? If you can get to that holy grail of being the number one target getter in your offense, that's when you can unlock that elite upside. He seemed to have a chance to do that this season, and now we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but yeah, it's a bad day all around now.
Yeah, I was on my phone as we have the waiting screen here ready to start recording and to go live. And I'm like, oh my God, I've got 4 Tucker Kraft teams. Cause folks, if you listen to this podcast and you hear us talk about fantasy, I think I speak for Boone here as well. We take our own advice. So if you guys are happy about Tucker Kraft, we're happy about Tucker Kraft because that guy's on our teams. If you hate me for touting, insert player here, guess what? I've probably got that player on a couple of teams as well. So yeah, we're hurting together. We're celebrating together. That's fantasy football. Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens with this Tucker Kraft thing. We just showed the tweet from Rob Domofsky, which he's officially listed as limited in practice now, I guess because he got hurt mid-practice, but they're not worried that it's season ending is rather ominous here. So hopefully we're all just kind of freaking out about a little minor thing and he ends up playing on Sunday or he misses 1 week or whatever. But in the meantime, I know I've got Brenton Strange as a backup tight end. I've liked the way that Jaguars team has looked so far. He, I think, has been getting some nice stuff. You can find some tight end replacements. Like I said, Brenton Strange to me, Boone, I think is someone that is a guy that's out there. Any other kind of replacement based players you think could help out folks that need to prepare for a Tucker Kraft absence?
I mean, people could check out my waiver wire column. I go all the way down so deep in that one. You can see all the guys that are available on the waiver wire this week. I also did my deep stashes column that came out today. And in that one, I highlighted a few guys who are under 15% rostered. So they're available in most leagues. One guy who potentially might be back this week is Isaiah Likely. He could be kind of interesting. Ooh, yeah. I'm gonna ask you about him a little later in the show. I got a question for you about Isaiah Likely. For the Packers, though, I mean, Luke Musgrave is an interesting tight end. He's got some vertical ability. We've seen him put up some good fantasy days in the past. Just Tucker Kraft came in and passed him on the depth chart. So with the state of that receiving core right now, with Jaden Reed out, it's a situation where Musgrave actually might have some value and be a streaming option for you as well. And then in the receiving core for Green Bay, what are we looking at now, right? Romeo Doubs, a touchdown getter, a guy who normally doesn't have the biggest games, kind of just some splash plays once in a while where he finds the end zone. Dontavian Wicks, kind of interesting now. Could see more opportunity for him. Somebody who, if he could just catch the ball all the time, might be a true fantasy star. And then Matthew Golden, the rookie. Could this potentially open up some more targets for him? He's a guy that I'm holding the places that I have him in hopes that he can come on as the season goes along. But I think this only furthers the case for the Packers that they're just going to try to win with the running game and with that great defense. And fantasy-wise, unless you have Josh Jacobs or unless you have the defense, it's not great news if you own any of these pass catchers.
Yeah, I do think that the passing game potentially concentrating here around 3 guys if we don't have Tucker Kraft, and obviously Jaden Reed had the surgery double whammy there between he not only got the collarbone fixed, but he's like, well, I'm already under. Go ahead and fix the foot too. So I don't know when the hell we're gonna see him. So I think the passing game potentially concentrating between Romeo Doubs, Matthew Golden, and Dontavian Wicks. I'm glad you brought Dontavian Wicks up. Really like 4 impressive hands catches, like true extension, win the ball with his hands on Thursday night last week. And I really love the way they used him too. He was like in motion at the snap. He was like running a lot of these out-breaking routes. And I kind of think that leans into a little bit more of his strength than some of the stuff where he was like going over the middle last year. So I'm still keeping, no pun intended, I've still got the candle lit for Dontavian Wicks. And obviously Matthew Golden's certainly a guy that he just needs more like base routes. He's running all vertical stuff right now. And those got to become closer to the line of scrimmage for him to be a true fantasy factor. In addition to, he has to like actually be on the field more often than he has been so far. So we'll see if that is like their 3 receiver set. I actually think 1 or maybe 2 of those guys could get interesting from a fantasy perspective, but I'm glad you highlighted your waiver article. As I always say here, we are reading again in 2025. So if you need an injury-based replacement there, obviously there's Juwan Johnson, Harold Fannin, who are like 45, 43% rostered. If they're available in your league, go grab them right now. Juwan Johnson should be like 100% rostered or maybe 100% started. And we'll talk about Isaiah Likely later. I agree. He is definitely somebody who could help you out. But with that, let's get down to our usual business here on the weekly preview show. Here's how these shows go. If you are new here, first 2 segments of the shows will feature Boone's 6-pack of questions for each week's slate of games. Segment number 3, this is where I come in here. Literally no one's games of the week. I pick 3 games that are not headliners by any means, but we think you need to care about them from a fantasy perspective. And then segment 4 is the hurry up offense, rapid fire questions, predictions, where we react to each other before we close out the show. But with that, let's dive into Boone's 6-pack of questions for week 3. All right, Boone, give me your first question here for the week.
So this one, we're going to do something a little different here off the top, Harmon. We're going to play a little game of fact or fiction with this first segment.
Okay.
I want to know if you think that the early season fantasy results from some of the top 12 fantasy receivers, the wide receiver ones in fantasy, if they are real or not. And I mean, who better to weigh in on this than you, right? I want to get your takes on these guys. I don't just want to be selfish either and like text you because I know I can do that now, but let's do it on camera so everybody can see it. Everybody can know how you feel about these players. And we're not going to waste our time with like some of the big names that are in the top 12 because those guys, we're not worried about them. They'll be fine. It's some of the more interesting names, some of the newer names that are in the top 12 here. So let's start with, and I think I know the answer on this one, but let's start with our guy, Roma Dunze. I don't like to focus on the hits that I have in fantasy because I just expect that I should be accurate more often than not. I normally focus on the misses I kind of dwell on that and I beat myself up and I try to get better and learn from my mistakes. But this is one where I think maybe we can pat ourselves on the back a little bit because going back to the summer, we were talking about Odunze, the beat writers, saying that he might take over as the number 1 receiver in this offense. And now it looks like that's what's happening, right? In week 1, little bit deceiving. He did have 6 catches, only had 37 yards, scored the touchdown, did it on 9 targets though. And we highlighted that on this show that he had 9 targets in that game. The usage was there. And then what happened in week 2? 7 catches, 128 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now he is the wide receiver 4 overall in fantasy. And he's heading into a very juicy matchup, a potential shootout here with the Cowboys. So I want to know, is Odunze actually the Bears' number 1 receiver moving forward? And is he potentially a fantasy wide receiver 1 moving forward here, Harmon?
Yes, definitively. I think to the Bears wide receiver 1 question for sure. And this goes beyond the the stats, which he's 12th in overall team target share among wide receivers and tight ends. He's 15th in air yard share among wide receivers and tight ends. Like he's getting that alpha dog volume. But I talked about this with Nate yesterday, where even just from a conceptual standpoint, like the routes that he is running, he is being set up to be that number one guy. Like they're scheming things for him. They're scheming him to get the opportunities. I saw like a mic'd up segment with him because I liked a few Roma Dunze things because I, like literally on Twitter, liked a few. And now my whole timeline, I'm getting spammed with like Bears stuff and Roma Dunze stuff, which I'm okay with. Okay. By the way, I'm not complaining. Better than some of the other things you see on social media out there. So I'm good with that. More Rome content is cool with me. I'm getting hammered with this stuff. I see like a mic'd up segment between him and a bunch of guys. I didn't watch the whole thing because I do have a little bit of a life. So he like Antoine Randall, wide receiver coach, like, hey, you got a touchdown celebration ready today? Like before the game, and he's like, yeah. So you can see there's opportunities being given to him. So I do think Bears wide receiver 1 for sure. I think DJ Moore might be a trade candidate by midseason. Just getting some younger guys involved there. But the overall wide receiver 1. I think I'd buy him more.
A fantasy wide receiver 1, so a top 12.
That's I know. Yeah,
can he stay inside the top 12? Yeah,
I think he probably I feel confident top 15. I feel very confident top 15. I do think top 10 wide receiver finish this season is very possible because the talent's there, the opportunity's there. Let's just see if this offensive ecosystem kind of stabilizes a little bit. That would be my one thing. But I definitely think he's a top 15 guy that there are players that went ahead of him that I would rather have him right now. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think he's the one on this list that, for me, I absolutely think he's got a shot to do this and to emerge. And I think that offense is going to get better as we go here. I don't think we've seen the best by any means, not even close. We're just scratching the surface. And if he's already producing like this, I'm really, really hopeful for what he can do the rest of the season. So, yeah, I definitely agree on that one. And I got a bunch I want to ask you about, so I'll keep going through these here. Yep. The next one, it's 2 teammates that are in the top 12, so I'm gonna talk about them together here. Quentin Johnston is the wide receiver 5 at the moment. Keenan Allen, the wide receiver 12. These results have just blown me away, right? Like these guys are outscoring Ladd McConkey at the moment, and Ladd McConkey has a biceps injury this week. We're gonna have to keep an eye on that one. How's he doing? Could that cause him to be limited in any way or potentially miss some time? That's one we're gonna track all week long. But these guys are putting up very, very good numbers, right? 5 for 79 and 2 scores in the opener for Johnson. And I think at that point it was like, okay, it was just one of those Quentin Johnston games where he blows up and he finds the end zone a couple times and he'll immediately fall back to earth. And then 71 and a touchdown in week 2, keeps it going. And again, maybe this is just a small sample size, but very nice to see him producing like that. And then Keenan Allen, right? Not quite the same highs, but definitely great production. 17 targets in the first 2 games, 7 for 68 and a touchdown, 5 for 61 and a touchdown in these 2 contests. And you wonder if this is sustainable to some degree, at his age and with this many guys kind of contributing in the offense. But as you pointed out, this is a passing attack now. They are throwing the ball plenty. I think they can sustain these guys with the tight ends not doing that much, with them not throwing to the backs that much. So Harmon, what say you about these 2, right? I do think it's probably a little lofty to suggest top 12, but where do you think they kind of belong now in terms of rest of season rankings and where they should be valued for fantasy?
Top 12, no, but both guys every week fantasy starters, unless you're loaded at wide receiver, yes. And I have some QJ teams, I have some Keenan Allen teams. It just so happens that my Keenan Allen teams do happen to have other good receivers in front of him, but I'm for example, I really like Chris Olave. I think the role in the Saints offense is very good. And I'm I think you should stop me if you've heard this before, but Chris Olave, buy low in fantasy football. It's about that time of the year again. Hopefully it actually turns into something, but he's a guy this week going against Seattle. I'm kind of weighing, do I want to start Keenan Allen? Or do I want to start Chris Olave? I think that that's where these guys are. They're every week wide receiver 3s. They probably are guys you want to break ties in favor of putting in your flex. All 3 of them are top 30 in overall target share right now because they're passing the ball so much and they're only throwing to these guys, right? They're only throwing to wide receivers. They're not throwing to tight ends. They're not throwing to the running backs, nor should they. And I think right now they've just made a concerted effort to become more of that pass first team. So do I think top 12? And do I think these guys will outscore Ladd McConkey over the course of the season? No, I think Ladd, as long as he's healthy, you should be playing him and he should be the one. But over the course of the year, I think all these guys are fantasy starters here.
All right. The next guy here is a very, very interesting one. And I think also has a legit chance to finish top 12 this year, which is stunning based on where he was going in drafts before the season. Zay Flowers, the wide receiver 6 overall right now, top 10 in targets on the season, just went off against my Bills in the opener, 7 for 143 and a touchdown, had 7 for 75 against the Browns last week. Looking like they are really featuring him in this offense, even though there are some new weapons there. DeAndre Hopkins getting involved, especially around the end zone. And that's a big thing for him, right? Like we want to see Zay Flowers actually score some touchdowns because in the past, that's kind of been what's been holding him back for fantasy. Mm-hmm. Do you think that he could potentially flirt with wide receiver 1 value this season? And I don't want to lead the witness, but I'm kind of telling you, I think there's a chance that he can.
I think so too. He is, I said this earlier this week in the show. When you look at like wide receiver efficiency charts, he is up there with Jackson Smith and Jigba in what I like to call the Puka quadrant. You know, that top right of like when we're sorting by any per route efficiency stats or usage stats, he's up there. And I do think that if I had to pick between the two, like JSN or Zay Flowers, which one's more likely to regress, I do think Flowers is a little bit more in danger there just because they do have likely coming back. Rashad Bateman's not going to be under 20 yards receiving in every single game. DeAndre Hopkins is popping up. You know, obviously they're a run-heavy team. Maybe Mark Andrews can do something at some point. So I think there's just more like teammate competition there. But regardless, like, can he stick as a wide receiver 1 in fantasy? I do think so because I think the talent is there. And he's making that year 3 leap, man. He's making that leap where back in the day, Boone, we used to talk about like the 3rd-year receiver breakout. That was the time to fly. These guys can get on the field a lot earlier now, of course, and be like impact players. Zay Flowers has been an impact player since day 1, but why can't this 3rd season be that year where he goes from a guy that I've had as 2nd and 7th in success rate versus zone coverage in each of the first 2 seasons of his career and a solid man coverage beater to just like taking that next step against man coverage where he's actually been really productive this year and be like a full field wide receiver 1. And he's paired with a great quarterback. Like he checks a lot of boxes other than, maybe that touchdown column.
Well, I will say I do my rest of season rankings and trade value charts. I have him as the wide receiver 10 the rest of the way. And this week I have him even higher. I have him as the wide receiver 9 this week. So I am all in on Zay Flowers. Got a couple more here for you. Deebo Samuel is the wide receiver 8. And Deebo's a guy, we've seen him do this before. He's one name on this list that has been a wide receiver 1 before. Certainly taking advantage of Terry McLaurin having that hold out, hold in situation and starting kind of slow to the season. But Deebo, 8 touches in the opener, 96 yards and a score, 7 for 44 and a touchdown in week 2. He's very involved in the offense. You know, we'll see if Jaden Daniels ends up playing this week or not. It seems like there's a chance that he might miss this game. I think even if he's not out there, that Marcus Mariota can do some things. We're going to talk about the backup quarterbacks later. But I think if he's not out there, it's only more reason why they might scheme up some stuff to Deebo. So for this week, I think it could actually work out for Deebo. He's been the wide receiver 1 before. Can he do it again, Harmon?
I'm going to say no, but the thing that gives me some hesitancy there is that I think he will be involved as a rusher. Like I think, the Bill bros really hated Eckler apparently before this. I think you better get ready to hate Deebo Samuel because like I think Deebo Samuel's ready to take some rushing work there. So far this season, Deebo Samuel has a 4.72 air yards per target. Like it's just you're going to need to get pumped a lot of volume if that's the receiving role that you have. And like I didn't find his week 2 game that impressive. He got the late touchdown. Like he was getting like a lot of underneath stuff. So I think he'll have like some big weeks because he's still a guy that can play and play in a singular role and he's in the right offense for it. But I am a little skeptical about wide receiver 1, like every week starter over the course of the season.
We can't say week 2 was also against that Packers defense. I think we're going to be giving a lot of guys a pass for going against that Packers defense.
Of course.
This year. All right. This is a fun one. And I know you're not going to enjoy this one, but
no.
Wan'Dale Robinson is the wide receiver 9 on the year.
The answer is no.
14 catches, 197 yards, and a touchdown. There's no chance that he's going to be a top 12 fantasy receiver. But you are, I think, coming around on him a little bit. Better quarterback play. Going to have a better fantasy season this year. I don't think he's going to revert to the PPR scam thing.
I don't think so either. I mean, he's actually getting targeted 10.4, air yards right now. Like that's way bigger than it used to be. He's actually like got a positive EPA per target, which last year he was in the negatives. I do think he should be rostered in fantasy and like probably more of a bench guy, can help you through the bye weeks. He's definitely getting more vertical targets right now than he used to, but I kind of wonder if week 2 is overinflating what we're looking at right now, just because that Cowboys zone defense is so easy to beat, like right up the seams. And that's what Russell Wilson was doing with these guys. Like, Wan'Dale Robinson had like multiple go route receptions last week. Like, do I think that's happening on a regular basis? I am a little skeptical.
All right. And then the last one here, the wide receiver 10 on the season. I don't think we need to spend much time on this one because we've probably said his name more than any player since I started coming on the show. Emeka Egbuka, 4 for 67 and 2 scores in week 1, 4 for 29 and a touchdown last week. He's dealing with an injury. He missed practice here to start the week. We'll see if he's going to be out there this week or if he's limited in any way, but do you think he can kind of keep this going, what he's done so far? I know some people are out there saying, is he already the number 1 receiver on the Bucs? I mean, the numbers haven't been like crazy. He's got the touchdowns that are boosting the fantasy scoring, but he's only got 8 catches on the year so far. Like, it's not just astronomical production, but he's been delivering like we were hoping before the season.
Yeah, and I mean, he can be a good player in fantasy and not be the number 1 receiver on the Bucs, but he's 73rd among 40 players that have run 40 plus routes and targets per route run. Like, Mike Evans is definitely still, I think, the dude there, and he's had some tough matchups. Obviously, Derek Stingley last week. I'm not going to call like Egbuka a sell high or anything. I am a little bit worried though about the Bucs overall ecosystem. They're now down 3 offensive line starters. Luke Kadecki's going to miss time. Cody Mock just went on season-ending IR. Tristan Wirfs is still not back out there. Like, I was like, okay, when this offensive line gets Tristan Wirfs back, we're going to be good to go. Now we're already picking off like pieces from it. That does concern me a little bit for all of my Bucs players here in 2025 the rest of the way.
And that is the list, Harmon. I mean, we didn't mention the Chris Godwin thing with Egbuka, but I'm not that worried about Chris Godwin being a problem for him. It will take some targets away, but I think Egbuka is going to be above Godwin moving forward. I just think that's the way it is. I don't think Godwin's coming to steal that job back. So yeah, I really like Egbuka, but no, I don't think he's going to be a top 12 guy. But you did very well, man. You did very well going through those. Appreciate that.
I like to think that I was relatively unbiased in some of this stuff. I think I was fair to my guy Wan'Dale Robinson, and Egbuka, like I do think he needs more targets. Like, I think if he's going to give you week to week viability in fantasy, I do think he needs more targets. But I'm also not somebody that's going to sit here in a 2-week sample for a damn rookie receiver and like overreact to basically any stat, especially like from a negative standpoint. So that's definitely something that can improve over the course of the season. But okay, let's get to your second stat here for week 3.
All right. So we kind of did this with the Jets offense after week 1, saying, could they keep it up? And we were relatively optimistic, and they did not keep it up in week 2 against the Bills. Hopefully I'm not going to, put a hex on this next offense either, but I want to know, can the Colts offense keep this up? And if you had just said after week 1 that, they had a big game against the Dolphins defense is struggling like crazy, and then, okay, they just went off in that one and they're going to fall back down to earth when they face the Broncos. But no, they go against the Broncos and have another really solid game against a quality defense. And now on the season, Daniel Jones, the QB2 overall, Jonathan Taylor, the RB3, Michael Pittman, the wide receiver 21, Tyler Warren as a rookie, the tight end 4 right now. Harmon, do you think this is potentially legit, or is this a situation like, and I remember the Saints last year, do you recall after the first 2 games, the Saints were just crushing it. They looked fantastic, and then everything fell apart after that. Could that be what we're seeing here with the Colts, or do you think they can sustain this?
I don't think they will have quite as big of a fall off as the Saints, because the Saints, like, we have to remember, they started suffering like cluster injuries on the offensive line. They lost Olave and Shaheed. Derek Carr eventually went down. So I don't think they'll have that big of a fall off. That being said, like, can they keep it up? Like, can they score on 82% of their drives over the course of the season? The answer to that is obviously no. They will not do that. But I don't know, Boone. Like, I think this. I feel actually really good about them being a top 15 offense, which, like, at a bare minimum, which coming into the season would have been a huge bar to clear. And I'm open to being even too low there. I'm open to this maintaining as like a top 12 type of offense. There's always the Daniel Jones trapdoor. I get that. But this is really well designed. And unlike the Saints last year, this is also a really deep unit. Like the pass catchers go so deep, even if we're just looking at the guys that we see on the screen right now. Pittman, Downs, Pierce, obviously Tyler Warren, and then Jonathan Taylor. I don't know about you, man, but I keep looking back at like where I had him ranked from an overall perspective coming into the season. And like, shout out to Scott. Scott had him 10th overall. And I remember asking him like, damn, Jonathan Taylor, like that high? And he's like, yeah, he's a really good running back. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, I wish I was more like Scott, and I wish I had him. I don't think I have very many JT teams, not because I was like actively avoiding him, but there was just always somebody a little bit higher than me. And I'm kicking myself about that because he looks incredible right now.
Yeah, there were concerns about the offensive line, some of the guys that they had lost there. I think there were maybe some concerns about the usage too, bringing in DJ Giddens, and is he going to get involved? And in week one, he did, but it was just because they were crushing in that game and they were able to give him some garbage time touches, right? Like you look
and
at Taylor
especially
right
like
now,
if Richardson had started, then it would have been even another concern too, because he's not throwing to the running backs, he's taking goal line carries, and Jones is not doing either.
For sure. And shout out to Shane Steichen for like making that call. And at the time, I know everybody was kind of unsure whether that was the right move, but the biggest loser in all of this is Anthony Richardson, because Daniel Jones, who would have thought he was the guy that was going to come in and like provide competent quarterback play and just keep this thing moving and unlocking everybody's fantasy ceilings. It's very impressive. I'm with you on the Taylor thing though. I am kicking myself a little bit on that one. I mean, he played 93% of the snaps last week. You know, week one, it would have been probably similar if they needed him to be out there the whole time, but they didn't. 16 targets, 75 yards in over 75 yards in both games. You know, he hasn't found the end zone. That's kept his fantasy points per game. Sorry, what am I? No, sorry. I'm looking at the Tyler Warren stats. I got them mixed up here. Now I'm talking about Tyler Warren. Another guy in this offense who is absolutely killing it and looks great, and is somebody who I think is an absolute buy low right now. He's the one with 16 targets. He's the one who was at least 75 yards in both games. But another piece of this offense that's coming through, in part because he's a talented player where they drafted him, and in part because, you know, he's a great player. And, you know, Shane Steichen is unlocking this offense and putting these guys in great positions. It's great to see. And this is an offense that I want to buy into right now, Harmon. Like if I can get in, even if I'm buying high, and I know Daniel Jones was on a lot of waiver wires. I recommended him getting picked up the last 2 weeks. But if you can make a trade, if people don't realize that Jonathan Taylor is now essentially an elite running back, like his usage is right up there amongst the elite. If people aren't realizing that, you spend up and you get him. Same with Tyler Warren. And I'd be willing to buy in a Michael Pittman who's coming off a down game, but I think that's because of the matchup that they had and having to go against Pat Surtain. So this is an offense that early in the season, we find these sometimes where the landscape has changed. You have to adapt to it. And this Colts offense is one that I want to be a part of.
Yeah, and I like Josh Downs got a lot of targets per route run last week. Like he's going to be a tough guy to predict just because like if he continues to be kind of a sub package player, but he's going to be really helpful to this offense and like keep this offense afloat and like help Daniel Jones. I remember, I think it was some parts of Richardson's second season, so last year, where Downs was clearly there as his like break glass in case of emergency player. And because Anthony Richardson was so often playing in chaos, that's why he had those like high target per route run numbers, in addition to Joe Flacco obviously getting out to him in the quick game. So like Downs is going to be important to Jones, even if he's not going to do the like full PPR scam Wan'Dale Robinson type thing, which is a dishonorable way to earn your production anyways. That's too good for Josh Downs anyways. But I mean, yeah, for Pittman, for these guys, like they might all, I still think they're all going to eat into each other from a fantasy perspective. And like, there's going to be weeks where, yeah, Josh Downs gets like 3 targets or Michael Pittman gets 3 targets, or there's probably someday going to be a day when, you know, Tyler Warren has like a 1 catch game or something like that, just because there's so many guys and because JT is balling. But still, that doesn't make me not want to invest in these guys. I'm with you. This is an offense like, it's time to adjust those expectations. Matchups coming up here for this team. They're in Tennessee this week. Then they go to Los Angeles to play the Rams. That will be a key one to see like what's the level of sustainability. But then like Raiders, Cardinals, Chargers, Titans again. Like there are some decent matchups here before they go on a week 11 bye. It's a mixed bag, but I still think in the aggregate, this ends up being a top 15 offense.
Yeah, I mean, second in the league in passing yards right now, third in the league in rushing yards. Like you said, I don't think they're going to stay up in that range, but they are going to be a very quality unit. You want to tell me top 10 even? I would buy it. I know you said top 15. I think maybe even top 10 if they keep this up. I definitely think it's sustainable. And Daniel Jones, yeah, doing what fantasy wise we've seen him do before a few years ago with the Giants. Yeah, let's see if we can keep it going.
All right, let's hit your third question here before we get to break.
All right, another team that I'm kind of curious what they are. And in week 1 for the Lions, they came out and just had a terrible performance. Week 2, much, much better. Arguably one of the best performances we're going to see from an offense on the season. So which version of the Lions offense is going to show up in week 3? And I think we can paint a very clear picture on this one, because why did they struggle week 1? Sure, that Packers defense is great. Also, they were on the road. They were outside. In week 2, they go back home, the nice comfy dome, and they go up against the Bears, and they just annihilate them, right? Put up a 50 burger against them. And this just goes right back to the Jared Goff situation. Fantasy-wise, we know what the splits have been. It's incredible, right? Like, according to Fantasy Points data, Goff has averaged over 5 fewer fantasy points per game when you compare his dome contests and his games outside over the last 3 years. 5-point difference. Come on, right? This team thrives on the fast track. And, I've said it before, but I think there's a lot of reasons why he had that top 10 fantasy finish last year. The schedule was very easy for them. He didn't have an outdoor game until week 9. He only had 3 outdoor games total during the fantasy season. And now this year they come back, 2 of his first 3 here outdoors. Week 1 was, and now he's going back outside on the road against a good Ravens defense. I think we're going to see them look a little bit closer to what they were in week 1 rather than what we saw in week 2. I'm curious what you think, though.
I think it'll be somewhere in the middle. I don't think it'll be as bad as week 1. And I think that they got back to some of their usual stuff last week. I'm almost ready to ban this phrase ethical hooper when we're talking about quarterbacks, by the way, but put that aside. That's on my radar, but we'll put that aside because we're showing that on the YouTube show right now. But anyways, the point in that is that, like, I think that John Morton got back to like play action last week. They're almost 45% play action rate. Their motion rates were up last week. So I think as long as they don't fall behind by like 10 points early in the first quarter again, 10, 15, 14 points, whatever, then I think the Lions will be okay.
So where do you stand now on these guys rest of the season? Like, I think Goff is in that like fringe QB1 range when he's indoors. And I think when he's outdoors, you just put him on your bench and you sit him, and don't be surprised if in my start sit column, he shows up there almost every time he's got to go outdoors on the road. Gibbs and Amunra, I think we said before the season, like no matter what the differences were here, Ben Johnson gone, the offensive line changes, you still just play those guys no matter what. Montgomery does look like he's going to be like that touchdown or bust RB3. Jameson Williams, big game last week, but he's almost like a weird like touchdown or bust kind of guy. I think like the volume, I don't know it's going to be there for him week in and week out. So he kind of needs like that long touchdown to come through for fantasy most weeks. Laporta, I see him as like an auto start. I don't know that I feel like super confident. Like he's certainly not an elite tight end, and he's going to have his weeks where he doesn't get the volume and he's the man left without a chair. But based on the tight end situation right now, I think you just play him. And then there's Isaac Tesla. Can he potentially carve out a role here, Harmon? Could Isaac Tesla be a guy in this offense, or does he need like an injury, you think, to come through?
I think he probably needs an injury, although he could just play more than Khalif Raymond at some point. I always love when the coaches say this, like Dan Campbell's like, we got to find more ways to get him some more routes and playing time. Like, I wonder who's in charge of that, Dan. But obviously he's just trying to hype up his guy there. But I think at some point, maybe back half of the year, I think he does bring a skill set that they need. That would really eat into like Jameson Williams, who I agree is a guy that is going to be touchdown or bust. And he might be someone that like, okay, he might share the home road splits with Jared Goff, honestly, because he's a guy that probably wins on that like fast track, the in breakers and stuff like that. But I think he really nailed it, like in terms of how I'm viewing these guys. And frankly, Boone, like, shout out to us. That's kind of how we viewed them coming into the season, it felt like.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, we are going to take our first quick break. When we come back, we have 3 more questions to run through heading into week 3 right after this. All right, we are back. Justin, Boone, and I are continuing to preview week 3. And your next question here, Boone, is a big one because it's pretty much like the theme of week 3.
Well, and I will admit that I saw you wrote an article on this topic, and I thought, you know what would be easy? If I make this one of the questions and I can put my feet up and I can let Harmon just answer them all, right? So this one is, are we buying or selling all these backup quarterbacks who could potentially start? Some of them we know they're going to start. Some of them we're not quite sure yet, but we can list them off. I mean, Mac Jones is going up against the Cardinals, Marcus Mariota against the Raiders, Jake Browning at the Vikings. The other side of that game, Carson Wentz versus the Bengals, the old Jake Browning, Carson Wentz game. Gotta love that. And then Tyrod Taylor against the Bucks. Now, again, you wrote the article, Harmon. You're going to do the heavy lifting on this one. So let's go through them. I mean, Mac Jones to me, and I'm going to bring them up in the order that I have them ranked for week 3. Mac Jones to me last week was the QB9 overall. He throws for 279 yards and 3 touchdowns. That wasn't all him. That's certainly a lot on the weapons around him that make life easy and that Shanahan system. I think this is the player. If you're looking at all these guys and he ends up starting, I think he's the one that could have a really big week here against the Cardinals.
Interesting. There's definitely somebody that I think I like better if you're picking a quarterback off the waiver wire. We'll get to him.
I like the tease.
But yeah, Mac Jones. Yeah, Mac Jones played well. He's also the one that I feel like has the most likely odds to not start, just because Purdy was participating on Wednesday. Kyle Shanahan left the door open for Purdy basically to play this week. So I think Purdy's got a shot to get back out there. Jones is the one I think most likely to get, rug pulled. If you're relying on him, then you're kind of scrambling on Sunday. But I agree that he did play well. 53.8% of his pass attempts went for 10 plus yards on Sunday. Obviously the one touchdown was just a big catch and run by Juwan Jennings, where I was like, this guy's out there running a 4.8 and like nobody's near him. Where is everybody? But I mean, I think they're using McCaffrey in these really fun ways as like a true real deal slot receiver. Ricky Pearsall's running vertical routes. Juwan Jennings is just like a steady Eddie guy in this offense. So yeah, like I think Jones, we saw it last week. He's not Brock Purdy. He can't create like Brock Purdy, in chaos, which is why Purdy lifts the ceiling of this unit. But we can get right back to the Kyle Shanahan 49ers quarterback, just color in between the lines and like, don't mess it up, stupid. Like that type of quarterback. And I think Jones showed last week he can absolutely do that.
Yeah, and whether it's Jones or Purdy, the Cardinals are super banged up in their secondary right now. Will
Yes,
Johnson,
great
Max
call.
Melton. We'll see if they're limited or if they're able to play this week. Looks like they could be shorthanded back there, and that would only make this matchup that much easier. So I was factoring that in as well. We'll see if Purdy can get out there. But to me, if Purdy's not out there, Mac Jones is a solid quarterback too. Pretty good streamer. Next up, I wonder if this is the guy that you're looking at. Marcus Mariota versus the Raiders. And again, with this one, we don't know for sure that Jaden Daniels is going to miss this game, but he hasn't practiced yet this week. We'll see if he can get out there on Friday. I really think like this is headed towards Daniels missing a game with the knee injury. And I'll just hand it over to you before I say anything about Marcus Mariota, who I'm also kind of high on. What's your take on Marcus Mariota? And is he that guy who you like the most out of this group?
Yes, he is. By the way, for the JJ McCarthy conspiracy theorists, that like, oh, this is not a real injury, which by the way, I don't buy into. I think he really is injured, but like, if there are people that are calling it like a soft benching, this is why, because like the Commanders are giving Jaden Daniels every possible, like we're going to wait to the last minute to declare him out. The Vikings like, McCarthy's out. Like he's out. He's not going to play. He's not going to play this week. We're going to go ahead and start Carson Wentz like right away. They said that. So for the McCarthy conspiracy theorists, that's why they believe that. But I'm with you. I do think that Marcus Mariota is probably starting on Sunday against the Raiders. So good matchup. And again, putting this article together, I think it was funny that we've had like a big sample of these guys like playing for their teams recently. Not a big sample, but like something to look back on. And for Marcus Mariota, he was obnoxiously efficient in this offense last year. He had 2 games where he threw double-digit pass attempts. Week 7 against the Panthers and Week 18 against the Dallas Cowboys. Marcus Mariota in those games averaged 10.1 adjusted yards per attempt, a 60% completion rate. Again, obviously small sample, but that would rank second in the league so far this year, behind only the great Daniel Jones and ahead of Brock Purdy at 56%. So that's how good he was. And also, he ran last year as well, over 90 rushing yards in those 2 games, combined 45.6 fantasy points in those games. And he also got the ball to Terry McLaurin too, who obviously needs some help. I know we're going to talk McLaurin later, but he threw to McLaurin on 29.5% of his pass attempts for a cool 13 targets, 12 catches, 152 yards, and a score. So like, I do think that Mariota, if he gets in there, I kind of put him up as like a top 15 quarterback, and I think I might be being conservative. I think he actually might be closer to a top 12 quarterback if he starts.
Nice. And yeah, I mean, based on the results last year, he was the QB9 and the QB6 in those 2 games that you brought up. So he definitely has that high end ceiling there, top 10 ceiling. So I like that call. And I think I have him as QB17, and I think I have Mac Jones as QB16. So they're pretty close together. We'll see how that shakes out. Jake Browning against the Vikings. Let's talk about Jake Browning and Carson Wentz here. I'm curious what you have to say about this one, because I think we both agree that Browning could be decent, like rest of season, filling in for Burrow for however long he's out. I know people were saying they were mad that I didn't leave Joe Burrow in my trade column and that I didn't have him in the trade value chart at the very bottom, but it was like, is he going to be back? I mean, they need to stay in the playoff hunt. I don't think he's going to be back this season. That's why I completely removed him. But over the long haul, Browning, I think, is going to be okay and keep this offense moving. I think the concern is he going to be able to do that over the next few weeks when they have some very, very tough matchups, starting with this Vikings defense?
Yeah. People won't forget that obviously the last time he played the Vikings, that was a really fun game. But of course, that was pre-Brian Flores. But he did get his revenge on. He had the clip where he said, "You shouldn't have effing cut me," like right into the camera, slamming his helmet down. So we'll see if Browning's still that juiced up to give it to the Vikings again. But that was a very different defensive ecosystem. But this is a little bit of a different Bengals offense as well. We talked about this in depth on the earlier show on the People's Panic Meter podcast this week, and pointed out that like the way they use Jamar Chase now is a lot more conducive to like getting layup targets. So I think again, if people really want the in-depth breakdown of the Browning stuff, they can go back and listen to that episode. Go check it out, obviously, here on YouTube. Subscribe. By the way, if you're watching us on YouTube right now and you're not subscribed, like, you might as well just put the dagger right into my heart. Like, what are we doing here? Come on. So subscribe to the channel. Go check out that People's Panic Meter episode for the full Browning breakdown. We've got a lot of stuff there. But, yeah, I mean, who's good on the under center stuff. He's really good on play action. I think they'll push the right buttons to keep the floor afloat for him and all these skill position players too. But it is certainly a difficult matchup. If I had T. Higgins this week, I would be feeling pretty nervous if I had T. Higgins, because they do all that zone stuff. Is he going to be pushing the ball downfield? But if I had Jamar Chase, I'd still be viewing him as like a top 10 receiver rest of season. Do you think that's too aggressive?
No, I agree. I think just volume-wise,
Okay.
of course, talent-wise, but I think he'll get plenty of volume. That's how it's gone, and Browning's been out there. He's just peppered him with targets, and I don't think that's going to change. I do worry about this next little stretch, though. It's not just the Vikings, right? It's Broncos, Lions, and Packers the 3 weeks after that. So it's going to be tough. And, yeah, I don't know that you're going to want to start Browning in this game potentially. If some of these other options are out there, I would probably go with them for this one. But I think rest of the season, Browning is going to be pretty good. On the other side of that game, Carson Wentz, I mean, he hasn't done much fantasy-wise in a while. And yet, all the things that I've said about Kevin O'Connell and this Vikings offense, they still stand to be true, right? Like, he's had Nick Mullins out there. He's had Josh Dobbs out there. He revived the career of Sam Darnold, made all those guys top 15 fantasy quarterbacks for however long they were starting in this offense. Could Wentz be the next one on that list?
I'll tell you what, Boone, I had a kind of a weird good time this morning putting together the Carson Wentz section of this backup quarterback article. You can tell, by the way, because it's the longest section of the piece, that I had fun. And it was for two reasons. One, it was the Carson Wentz part of it, which we'll get to here in a second. But two, we often say, well, it can't get much worse, right? And usually that's like what people say right before it gets a lot worse. I will say, I think the stats are, a little bit unfair here. And like McCarthy hasn't just been like a complete joke out there, but statistically, it really can't get much worse for the Vikings offense right now. Minnesota, McCarthy's 38.6% success rate ranks 33rd out of 34 quarterbacks to take 20 plus dropbacks so far this season. His EPA per dropback is 34th. He has the highest sack rate at 18%. The Vikings have averaged 2 minutes and 11 time of possession per drive on the season, which ranks dead last, and they've run 47.5 plays per game, which ranks dead last. So it actually can't really get much worse for your Vikings skill position players than what we've seen through the first 2 weeks. That's not all McCarthy's fault, and we should kind of squint at some of the parts of this ecosystem. The pass catchers beyond Jefferson. Jefferson has dropped footballs this year. He actually has a 15.4% drop rate, and also just the offensive line injuries as well. That's a big part of it. That being said, you mentioned the production they've gotten from veteran quarterbacks, and Carson Wentz, by the way, this stat from Bill Barnwell is insane that I saw. I linked to this in the article. I don't know if you've seen this either. Carson Wentz, if he starts, which he's going to start this weekend, he would become the first quarterback in NFL history to start at least one game for 6 different teams in 6 consecutive seasons. Eagles in 2020, Colts 2021, Commanders 2022, Rams 2023, Chiefs 2024, and Vikings 2025. And that Rams 2023 start, which probably is the one that everybody forgot, but also is the one that if you're trying to cope with your Vikings skill position players, well, he was actually really good in that game. He's been pretty much terrible the last 3 years, but he was actually pretty good in that game with a bunch of backups. And there's some system familiarity here with Carson Wentz and the Rams and Kevin O'Connell because they come from the same language. So I don't know. Again, I guess the selling point here for Wentz and these skill position players is it really can't get too much worse than it's been so far.
Fair enough. I got one more I want to ask you about too, and that's Tyrod Taylor, who I think I should move up potentially. I almost think I like him more than Carson Wentz. I don't know about you, but at least even at 36, he brings a little rushing ability out there. They have, a very concentrated offense, but they have these high-end talents and Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. The matchup with the Bucs, we know you can throw on the Bucs. They're tough against the run, but you can throw on them. I mean, last week he had over 8 fantasy points. He didn't even play 40% of the game, so he was on his way to putting up a usable fantasy day if he was out there for the whole game. And you look at what he's done in the past, right? At least 17 fantasy points in 3 of the 4 games where he played at least 90% of the snaps back in 2023. How's that for a stat for you? A lot of things going on in there, but yeah, he is a guy who can put up decent fantasy stats. He's not going to win you your week, but because of the rushing ability, veteran savvy, he can come through for you. Any interest in this one, Harmon?
Listen, if for whatever reason you're listening to the show, you're watching the show, and you've like followed my entire career dating back to the NFL fantasy days, you know I'm like a long time Tyrod Taylor guy. Like I love Tyrod. And the fact that like writing this article today, I realized he's 36 years old made me feel ancient. Like, yeah, I'm a longtime Tyrod truther, so I'm definitely willing to be excited about watching Tyrod in this, what I still think is a well-constructed Jets offense. He's also like, when he's gotten on the field, he's thrown 33 passes over the last 2 years with the Jets, and he's targeted Garrett Wilson on 27.3% of those. Like, he's gotten in there and he's known the assignment. You remember against your Bills last year when they got blown out? The Jets got blown out. It was 40-0. Tyrod comes on the field after reports early in the morning that Garrett Wilson was kind of starting to get sick of the Aaron Rodgers thing, and just immediately 3 targets to Garrett Wilson, including a fade route for a touchdown. Like, I kind of think that's what's going to happen here. So I really do think he can give you like a nice floor performance as a fantasy quarterback. And like, I don't know, especially with how bad Justin Fields was last week. If I was planning to start Garrett Wilson, the fact that it's Tyrod under center, Boone, like, I don't think that really changes my expectations. I think he can keep the ship afloat here.
Yeah, it might not be quite as good as the Justin Fields experience, but he can give you like a relative version of it. And yeah, I think that the offense will continue moving. And it helps that he doesn't have to keep a ton of guys afloat. There's really only 2 players that we're using for fantasy. So as long as he can make sure that they get going. And for Breece Hall this week, because of that tough run defense, he might have to do a little bit in the passing game to elevate those fantasy numbers. But yeah, I think Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall are going to be fine in this one, even with Tyrod Taylor out there.
And brother, you say he can't be the full Justin Fields experience or whatever. I mean, I watched the Justin Fields experience last week, and we're 3 weeks in, and it's already been a roller coaster for Fields. He was like QB2 on the week in week 1. Then he set a record for the worst completion percentage over expectation in the next gen stats era in week 2. And now he's in concussion protocol. Like, it has been the full Justin Fields whiplash experience. But all right, let's pick up the pace here a little bit. Let's hit your last 2 questions, which are a little bit of buy and sell sort of theme here.
Yeah, so we went, buy and sell with those backup quarterbacks. Now let's talk a little buy and sell in terms of fantasy assets out there. And I mentioned the trade value charts earlier. In those trade value charts, every week for each position, I put a player that I'm buying, sometimes more, and a player that I'm selling. So it ends up being at least 8 guys in there who I'm buying and selling for the week. I want to talk about some of them. I'm throwing a few other names in here as well, but let's talk them through. I'll go by position as well. And we can just hit it hard with the Jets. Justin Fields and Brock Purdy are 2 guys that, based on the injuries they had, their managers might have looked elsewhere for other options. When it comes to Fields, they might be disappointed after that game against the Bills. I would buy into both of these situations. We talked about Purdy earlier and what he can bring. We know how good he can be for fantasy, a back-end QB1 for fantasy each of the last 2 seasons. The schedule is still great. The guys are getting healthy around him. We'll get George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk back eventually. Purdy's a great option. And even though Fields had that tough game last week, I think he is still going to have more usable fantasy weeks than not. So I really like both those guys. I will say Breece Hall is a buy as well here because another guy coming off a bad week, but it's the same logic, right? Like the same logic that we're looking at with Fields. You have that down week. If people are questioning, after 2 games, okay, one was great, one wasn't, what player is he? Try to get in there right now and go get him. The schedule for the Jets is so easy the rest of the way. For Fields, 3rd easiest among quarterbacks. For Hall, 3rd easiest among running backs. And you could look ahead to later in the season too. And you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself on trying to figure out fantasy playoff schedules, but the Jets have one of the easiest fantasy playoff schedules out there. So Hall is somebody that I would look to. And he's currently handling over 60% of the snaps in that backfield. We thought this was going to be a committee. He's going pretty much unchallenged as the lead guy. So another player who is a great fantasy asset. I think still underrated at the moment. Terry McLaurin. We're buying low. We're talking about these buy lows. Terry McLaurin, maybe the ultimate buy low. And you know why? Because last year he didn't have the holdout. He did the exact same thing, right? Like last season had 2 bad games.
True.
And then after that, put up 90 yards and or a touchdown in 8 straight contests. So I would not be surprised at all if the light switches on at some point here. He gets up to speed. He's back in game shape. And boom, we start getting some more of the Terry McLaurin games that we were used to last season. And then a buy high. Too many buy lows. Let's go with a buy high. And I mentioned all his stats before. I brought them up in that opening section. Let's talk about him again. Tyler Warren on the Colts. I don't know that everyone realizes just how good he can be for fantasy. And one of the reasons for it, and this is something to look at when you're trying to identify players to buy early in the season, he hasn't scored any touchdowns yet. So that's just, he's the tight end 4 overall. He's doing great at a position where there's not a lot of guys getting the kind of volume he's getting, but he hasn't had like those elite week winning kind of performances yet. So try to go out and get him while you still can. And if you have to pay up to do it, you do it, because this guy could legitimately finish as the tight end 1 overall this season, especially with our guy Tucker Kraft hurt now. So that might be another name out of the mix there. But Brock Bowers a little bit banged up. I still think he'll finish ahead of him. Trey McBride not scoring touchdowns yet. I still think he'll finish ahead of him. But Warren right in that mix with those guys based on the kind of volume that he's getting. So I think all those names are great buys right now.
You're definitely making me think about like some of these teams where I have Tucker Kraft, but like I'm deep at wide receiver, like maybe offering a wide receiver too, and seeing if I can get, a Tyler Warren type. Maybe, I don't know. We'll figure that out. But I like all those suggestions. I'll just say for Terry McLaurin, like if you're going to trade for him, you've got to expect some level of volatility, because Debo is getting those like easy touches, and McLaurin was already like a vertical guy. But that actually transitions as well to the players that you're selling this week, because one of them is a Washington Commanders play. Actually, 2 of them are Washington Commanders.
Yeah, so Jared Goff is one, and Jaden Daniels is the other when we're talking about quarterbacks here. The Goff one I won't get into again. We've talked about him plenty, all the splits. When you're coming off a game where he's throwing 5 touchdowns, that's not going to happen again, at least not for a while. Jaden Daniels, though, with this injury, with a knee injury, I'm a little concerned he's going to miss this game. I'm a little concerned that he's not necessarily going to be the same player for a little while. This is a guy that we're looking to as a potential dual threat rushing quarterback. And remember last season, he had that rib injury. And for a month or so in the middle of last season, he was not the same quarterback. He wasn't running as much. The fantasy stats were way down. Really somebody that you didn't want in your lineup. And then he got healthy and finished very strong. So if you're willing to ride this next little stretch out, that's fine. But if you want to move him right now and capitalize on that name before his value goes down a little bit over the next few games, next few weeks, next month or so, I would do it, because he is still someone that people love for fantasy. And again, a situation where I don't think people are factoring in that a dual threat quarterback with a knee injury might not be as effective on the ground. So he is certainly one. J.K. Dobbins, I hate this one because I don't like to try to predict injuries. And yet J.K. Dobbins is the one guy that every season of his career has gotten hurt. He looks great right now. He looks like a supreme fantasy value. He's the lead back in Denver. But will he be able to hold up over the long haul? I just think the injury is inevitable for him. And we have RJ Harvey there, who Sean Payton continues to talk up, who is going to get more work as the season goes along here. And I think when that Dobbins injury happens, that's when Harvey's going to take over. So you see a couple good performances from Dobbins early in the season. I think you want to cash in on that before that injury occurs. T. Higgins. Oh man, this one is so unfortunate. Could be a top 12 fantasy guy. And yet now with the Burrow injury, I don't think he's going to become anything like that. I think he's more of a volatile wide receiver 3 for fantasy. So try to get out on that one. I think everybody's going to realize that though. So you're not going to get top value, but still I would probably move off him and try to get something else. And then Travis Kelce and Zach Ertz as the last 2 options here, the guys that I think you should be selling. It's just moving off of old tight ends. These guys, they've had great careers. They've put up decent numbers in the first 2 weeks. Are they going to be able to continue this? Travis Kelce turned 36 during the season. Zach Ertz is turning 35 during the season. Zach Ertz found the end zone in back-to-back weeks. That double-digit per week fantasy production is not going to continue for him, especially if we have Jaden Daniels out of the mix for a game or so. So Ertz is definitely somebody that you want to move. And Kelce, you're capitalizing on the name value before Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy and all these other options come back. So I'm moving off of those 2 if you can.
Okay, Boone, that was great. I love the list. Good analysis. But we have to update something pressing here. We just got an update on Tucker Kraft. The insiders are tweeting this out. So before we go to break, Adam Schefter says Packers standout tight end Tucker Kraft, who injured his left knee at Thursday's practice, quote, got a little scare, but all good. One source said after tests today. Another source added, I think he will be okay. So maybe we freaked out at the top of the show and derailed the whole program for nothing. I'm hoping this is the case.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Emeka Egbuka and Tucker Kraft are probably the two players that we would do that for. And Egbuka, like I mentioned earlier, is hurt and missing some practice this week. So maybe we need to shift back to him and worry about him a little bit more. But this would be fantastic news. We would both breathe a really big sigh of relief if that was the case. That also doesn't mean, again, it's like the not season ending kind of situation.
Yeah, right. He might still miss this week.
For this week. Exactly. He might miss a game or so. But yeah, it sounds hopeful there at least.
Well, now I don't have to sit there and trade one of my wide receivers for Tyler Warren like I was thinking. Literally, when you said that, I was like, ooh, maybe that's something. I'm sitting here thinking about, like, could I do that? That might be interesting. But, yeah, look, I love Emeka Egbuka, but he was harder to get. Like, Tucker Kraft was easy to get. That's why I got a lot of Tucker Kraft teams. So that would have hurt. Again, not to make it all about my fantasy teams, but that would have stung. So I'm glad we've got this update. We have to go to another quick break. We come back. We'll talk through literally no one's games of the week right after this. Welcome back, and let's get into my literally no one's games of the week.
Is that you yawning, Harmon? Is that actually your yawn? It sounded like you.
No, mine's much louder and more obnoxious, like everything I do. Don't worry about that. But yeah, I had not seen that segment intro before we played it, so that was a legitimate reaction. I had no idea. They told me there was going to be a segment intro. I had no idea what it was going to be. But man, that is perfect for my first game up here, which has to be one of the most boring games we've seen in the NFL so far this year. New Orleans Saints at Seattle Seahawks, and this true. I mean, come on, Boone. I've pushed it with some of these. This is literally no one's game of the week. I'm actually thinking about it. I was like, what is the over-under for this game? It's 41.5, and I could very conceivably see this one going under because I have a weird fascination with the Saints offense, clearly putting out tweet threads about Chris Olave's usage and stuff like that. But I mean, they're going to get smoked by this Seahawks defense because it's really good. And then I can't quite figure out on the other. I mean, and the Seahawks are a slow-paced offense that are run heavy. Like, this game might be over. I don't know, because it's weird because the Saints push a lot. You see what I'm saying? The Saints push like the pace, but like, what is this game going to be? I have no idea here. And do you have like a take on anyone in this particular contest?
I mean, from a fantasy perspective, I'm just looking at it here. Like that Seahawks backfield, we want another data point on the Seahawks backfield. I haven't seen yet if Zach Charbonnet practiced today, but a weird role reversal there where now Zach Charbonnet is the one dealing with a foot injury and he's the one missing practice. And it's, Kenneth Walker coming out last week and having the big game, despite the fact that he actually played far less snaps than Charbonnet. Just a weird situation all around. Certainly seems like Walker is now going to slowly take the lead in that backfield again. Maybe further removed from his injury, like we kind of speculated was a possibility last week when we were kind of worried and, biting our nails and wondering whether Kenneth Walker was actually going to come through. It looks like he's going to be just fine there. So that backfield, is kind of interesting to me. And the other backfield too, like Alvin Kamara is playing very, very well. And I know the Seahawks defense is good, but Alvin Kamara, 177 scrimmage yards and a touchdown through 2 weeks here. I wonder, like you mentioned earlier, like DJ Moore, potential trade candidate. Do we think Kamara could get moved at some point? Because I've gone out and grabbed Kendre Miller and like stashed him on a ton of benches just on the off chance that Kamara gets moved here. I don't know if it'll happen or not, like contract wise and everything, but I don't know. That's one. If Kamara keeps playing well, maybe that almost like increases the odds that he ends up somewhere else.
It would make sense. They already gave him that weird contract extension that didn't make sense for this team's timeline. Like he should be on the Bears, bro. Come on. What are we doing? Yeah. Like Texans maybe too. There's a lot of Commanders. There's
Chiefs.
A lot of teams that could use. Yeah, there's a lot of teams that could use Alvin Kamara besides the Saints. The Saints could basically still run. Like in previous years, they could not run their offense without Alvin Kamara. They could run this version of the offense without Alvin Kamara. And by the way, to get you excited about the Kendre Miller thing, because I'm a sick freak and I was charting Chris Olave today and watching the Saints offense. There's one play that they ran 2 times where like Brandon Cooks runs like a full speed motion for the love of the game route, clears out of space, gets Olave a one-on-one on like a deep hook route. Rashid runs another deep hook route on the other side of it. And then Kendre Miller on the first one that Olave caught, the other one went incomplete to Sheed, but the first one that Olave caught, Kendre Miller got up there and had a pretty nice little pass block rep. I was like, ooh, yeah, that's right. Kendre Miller earning some trust and pass protection. We like to see that. So, yeah, maybe he's earned a little more trust and maybe Kamara does get moved. In the meantime, though, Zach Charbonnet did not practice, I believe, today. So that's definitely wheels up for Kenneth Walker potentially. I don't really have a good feeling for the Saints defense and like where you want to attack them, but typically Brandon Staley wants to put the roof on you and wants to kind of make you dink and dunk. They don't want to allow vertical passing shots. So that would just be probably more reasons, honestly, for, I would say, obviously JSN, but also Cooper Kupp got involved last week and he could get a decent bit of targets underneath in this game.
Yeah, it just seemed like they're like forcing Cooper Kupp the ball. I don't want to try to justify my Cooper Kupp ranking before the season, but it certainly seemed like an offense where they were like, hey, we kind of have to justify Cooper Kupp being here. Let's make sure we get him a ton of targets. I'm not that worried about Cooper Kupp being a fantasy difference maker moving forward. He might have the odd game like this, but yeah, JSN, big time. Kenneth Walker, big time. And overall, this is probably not going to be one of the games on my TV on Sunday.
I don't think this one's going to make the TV either. Pittsburgh Steelers at New England Patriots is our next game up for this segment. Yeah, oof is right. I will say, though, the Steelers defense is on my radar right now because based on – I was talking to our colleague Jory Epstein about this today, like, we were talking about the Jets offense a little bit. And I was like, honestly, my biggest take right now about the Jets offense, besides the fact that I think it's well designed, is also like – is the Steelers defense really, really bad? Because the Jets dog walked them in week 1 and then your Bills obliterated the Jets in week 2. And, it's kind of tough in the 2-week sample size to do the transitive property, Boone. But yeah, the Seahawks also kind of took it to the Steelers in week 2. And they looked like a unit that I thought would be old and slow coming into this year. And like they kind of look old and slow in that game. The Patriots don't have a ton of like players were interested in starting in fantasy, but could Drake May stack 2 good weeks back to back after a nice breakout performance last week?
Yeah, that's how I have it ranked. I have in that low end QB1 range. I think now we have to kind of accept that Ramondre Stevenson is the starter for the time being, and we're going to have to wait on Travion Henderson. Travion Henderson has to go to your bench. You are not playing him right now. Yep. Not even in your flex spot if you can avoid it. And Stevenson played well. Like, hats off to him. Like, he actually had a good game last week. He deserves to be the starter right now, and they're going to roll with it that way. you would at least hope that the Antonio Gibson stuff last week was more just like because of all those rookie mistakes that Henderson made in the game and the penalties and everything. Like, I think it was an in-game decision. I don't think they went into that game going, hey, we're going to get Antonio Gibson really going in this one. So fingers crossed that we get Gibson kind of pushed back down the depth chart a little bit and not as much usage in this game. Stephon Diggs, I mean, he's in that wide receiver 3 flex mix in this matchup. He can definitely take advantage of this one. Yeah, I don't know. It's so funny when we do this segment because there's not that much that you're really going all in on, but we're trying here, man. We're really trying.
That's the point. We're talking about the less marquee stuff. But yeah, no, I think I'm glad you said that about Ramondre Stevenson because like Ramondre Stevenson is a pretty good back. And I come back to sometimes like your first take is your right take when a player gets drafted to a team. I remember this with Marvin Harrison Jr. Last season and like talking with some of my subscribers at Reception Perception where he was first drafted. I was like, well, I don't want to just like moonwalk this guy right into like wide receiver 1 territory. And then, that's kind of what I did over the course of the summer. And then doing the podcast with you about Travion Henderson, we talked about like he might take a minute to get involved because like Stevenson is a good back, but then you get the preseason, you get all the hype and stuff like that. And then again, he ends up kind of being too high. Look, it could still end up working. It probably still will end up working out for Travion Henderson and for fantasy. It just might take a minute. But that was kind of, again, I feel like our initial read on the situation was like it might take a minute for Travion Henderson. So then to me, my reasoning for that is like Ramondre Stevenson's not a bad back. Like he's got issues. He fumbles too much and maybe he fumbles himself out of his job at some point. But in the meantime, like I do have a few Ramondre Stevenson teams, and based on how the Seahawks ran over the Steelers last week, like just run away from TJ Watt and you're good. I feel like he could have another pretty nice week here. The other thing I want to mention too for the Patriots, I don't have a lot to say about the Steelers, by the way, but the other thing I want to say about the Patriots is that Joey Porter Jr. missed last week, and Jackson Smith and Jigba as the perimeter receiver definitely took advantage of that. And he looks like he's going to miss again this week. He hasn't practiced yet. If you're doing the Kayshon Boutte stuff, like that might be a reason to get him in your lineup. I know he only had 1 target last week, as Ray and I discussed. We were both kind of right and wrong on our assessment of Kayshon Boutte as we debated it, which is a perfect debate. But yeah, I think that if you're chasing that, Joey Porter's absence might make him like flex worthy in this matchup.
I totally agree with that. I think this game is so straightforward from a fantasy perspective, right? It's May, it's Stevenson, it's Diggs, like we said, Kayshon Boutte as a flex, and then Metcalf and Warren for the Steelers, and don't really get yourself involved in anything else.
I'm really interested in this is more of a dynasty take, but because it would be a pretty bad sign, I think like Caleb Johnson might be a game day inactive for this matchup. If he's not returning kicks anymore, like he's not playing on offense, that's the Keaton Mitchell zone. That's when you get scratched on game day because you don't play special teams. So that is definitely going to cause some reaction to him, a player that was like a first-round pick in rookie drafts, if he's just a game day inactive after -1 yards from scrimmage on the season, Boone. He's quite literally going the other way. So that would cause some discussion here.
It's reminding me of like the Tank Bigsby rookie season, right? Like, remember when he like every time he got on the field, he just did something insane. Like he just fumbled the ball. It was a mistake anytime he was on the field. And that's kind of what we're seeing from Caleb Johnson right now. And the rumors from the summer seem to be true, right? That he was having issues with a lot of things like that. And he does not look like he's earning any playing time anytime soon.
All right. Last, literally no one's game of the week. I think this is the one I might be cheating a little bit, but look, it's an 0-2 team versus a 1-1 team in the AFC South. I don't think it's going to be a big headliner here. Houston Texans at Jacksonville Jaguars. I just want to see what both of these offenses look like. I mean, I think we kind of know who we're starting in fantasy, especially on the Texans side. Like it's Nico Collins, you're praying for pass protection and you're getting out of there. Although Jacksonville's front's been pretty good. On the Jacksonville side here, BTJ obviously has been the talk of the week, Boone, and not in a good way after a really brutal performance. And one that he has to own, as I've said over and over again. He's got to own that performance last week. It's not like, oh, it's all Trevor's fault, whatever. Now he's going against this Texans team that is, you're worried about getting hit? They have no problem lighting you up on the back end. So I definitely think the microscope will be on Brian Thomas Jr. in this game. I'm sure he's still a fantasy starter for you, and I have some BTJ teams where I'm going to be starting him, but I really am curious to see how this game goes.
I was trying to look up. I didn't get to it while you were talking there, what his practice participation was today, because I think he was downgraded with the wrist injury, and I don't know if that's like Liam Cohen trying to cover his tracks when he like let the wrist injury stuff come out. Or not, but
when did he suffer that? When did he suffer that wrist injury?
It's just a nagging injury. It's been around forever. I think he just lives with it. But yeah, I'm with you that as long as he's healthy, I think he's going to bounce back eventually here. I'm not too worried about it, as the ceiling maybe a little bit lower than it was right now with the way this offense and this passing attack's going, and the way that him and Hunter kind of aren't totally clicking yet. I think so, but still, certainly somebody that I'm putting in my lineup as long as the reports about his health are okay and we're not going into the weekend with any real concerns there. Totally fine with playing him. And then the other side, like Nico Collins is just waiting for that moment, right? Like 3 catches on 9 targets last week. It pulls it out 52 yards and a touchdown. It's an okay fantasy day, but there is a Boone game coming, and I think this might be it. His last 3 games against the Jags, 8 for 119, 12 for 152 and a touchdown, 7 for 104 and a touchdown. Could this finally be the Nico Collins spot? I think it could be.
Potentially. Christian Kirk is expected to play here in week 3, which I think will help. They just can't be running Justin Watson out there as a starting slot receiver. Xavier Hutchinson, okay, like we probably should see more of Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, which will just make the offense more dangerous and lead to more touchdown opportunities for Nico Collins. I mean, the guy was tackled at the 1-yard line. Like he almost had 2 touchdowns last week. For as much as like we've talked about this, he definitely he almost had a really monster game, and he still had like a usable fantasy game. Like your first round pick gets you 14.5 PPR points. You're going to be all right. Okay, you're going to be all right with that one. So hopefully, we really see that type of eruption performance here from Nico Collins. But again, like I said, Jacksonville's front has played pretty well. So that will be on my radar too, the pass protection part of it. And last thing obviously is just I think Travis Etienne is a must-start in fantasy, even though this is a not an ideal matchup. And Basil Tutin's a guy that should be 100% roster, and they don't think he is quite yet. So that's probably the last thing. Anything else on this game here, Boone, before we throw to break?
No, I will just add, I think Basil Tutin in practice this week dealing with a shoulder injury. I'm pretty sure he was out there in a non-contact jersey today. Hopefully that's just precautionary, but that's something that I'm keeping an eye on right now.
No question. Obviously, we're seeing Travis. We'll see if Travis Hunter gets more work on offense, the whole deal. Probably not somebody you can start in this matchup as it is. All right, we are going to take our last break. When we come back, we've got the hurry up offense, rapid fire questions, predictions, all that coming up right after this quick break. All right, we are back. Here's how this is going to go. Boone and I go rapid fire through the rest of the show, forcing the other person to answer a question or respond to a prediction for week 3 in 40 seconds or less. The one twist, one of us gets to throw the flag on the other and have them expand on their answer/reaction. If it's warranted, once the flag is thrown, that's it. It can only be thrown one time per show. So with that, welcome to the Hurry Up Offense. All right, Boone, as the older one between the two, much older one between the two of us, I will allow you to go first.
All right. Will Jordan Mason ever give the starting job back to Aaron Jones?
Hell no, buddy. I mean, let me tell you what, I don't even need the 40 seconds for, no, I mean, he might, but probably not. Probably not. He's been very efficient despite the fact that he has been getting hit in the backfield. And if I have a lot of Tucker Kraft teams, I also have quite a lot of Jordan Mason teams. So my bias may be showing with the enthusiasm of my answer. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's why I asked it. And I think even in Dynasty, I think moving forward, I think starting next year, he is going to enter the season as their number one running back in an offense that hopefully when the offensive line is there and everybody's there and they get some sort of semblance of good quarterback play, we'll be firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, when JJ, the next Patrick Mahomes, McCarthy is better than the 34th out of 34 quarterbacks so far. That would be great. Okay, my first one here for the week. Boone, which defense will look worse in Cowboys at Bears?
Oh, that is a great question. You know what? I'm actually going to say it's the Cowboys defense. I think the Bears are going to have a really good game. I think this is going to be the moment where it starts to come together, and I'm going to give that Bears defense a little bit of credit that they can pull it together in this game. But I think, yeah, this is a spot where Caleb Williams, we saw last year, he can put up those big weeks. He can put up week 1 or top 12 performances, QB1 performances. He didn't do it often, but he did do it last year. And I think this is going to be the first time where we see him put up a truly big game under Ben Johnson. I'm predicting a top 5 performance from Caleb Williams is one of my bold predictions this week.
Okay, I actually think I'm going to throw the flag on this one because I kind of think I disagree with you. I think I'd have Jalen Johnson's out indefinitely. Kyler Gordon's out. TJ Edwards is missing practice. Not only are they bad, they don't look like they're gelling with Dennis Allen. And, I mean, it's a new defensive coordinator. It might take some time. But, they've got all these injuries. The Cowboys offense looks great. Javonte Williams a baller. George Pickens, he's going to go off this week, Boone.
It's a coin flip between two bad options. So yes, you could go either way with it, but I went with the defense that just allowed Russell Wilson at this point in his career to put up 31.3 fantasy points. And that includes an interception in overtime that brought him back a little bit there. QB2 on the week, Russell Wilson last week. They're the third easiest matchup for fantasy quarterbacks right now. I think it's still that Cowboys defense that is going to have a very bad day, and the Bears are going to get going.
All right. Well, I'm sorry I wasted the flag on that, but producer Colin was in my ear threatening to replace me as the host of the show, and I do have 2 dogs to feed and a wife at home, so I couldn't lose this job. So, all right, with that, I'll throw it back to you for your next one.
All right. So we started the show with Fact or Fiction. I'm going to give you another sort of Fact or Fiction / bold prediction. Isaiah Likely will be the Ravens starting tight end by Halloween.
Fiction, because he's going to do it by the 1st of October.
I mean, that would still qualify, but yes. Yeah. We think he's going to be back.
I guess that's
this
true.
Week.
Yeah.
And Mark Andrews.
By was a key word. Yeah.
Not looking great. Mark Andrews not looking great right now. I think this is going to be Isaiah Likely's spot, and it sounds like you completely agree.
Yes. All right. I'll get to my next one here. Is it going to happen for Matthew Golden now that Jaden Reed is out, or was he just drafted to open up space underneath for Dontavian Wicks?
I worry that he was just brought in to be another contributor in this offense and not brought in because his profile wasn't a true big volume wide receiver.
True.
It was kind of to come in and be that speed guy and just another cog in the wheel of an offense that's very good. Now they're losing some pieces, and that might force him to take on a little more volume and maybe some gadgety type plays as well. But yeah, I don't see him emerging as like that true number one guy. I think they're going to continue to spread it around in that offense. That's just what Matt LaFleur wants to do. And like I said earlier, I think it's going to be a lot of run game and a lot of great defense winning them performances.
All right, back to you for the next one.
All right. Which team with a losing record are you most willing to invest in for fantasy?
Oh, God. Jeez. Probably Houston. Oh, probably Houston. I mean, it's Nico Collins. It doesn't feel it doesn't feel good. And like, is somebody going to emerge from the backfield? The rookie receivers, when those guys get out there, can they make a difference? I think I'm going to keep the light on for Houston, not just because they were also the only team I could remember with an 0-2 record off the top of my head.
The Bears are also there, which we just talked about. But I would say, too, just to add, Nick Chubb playing fairly well so far. Nick Chubb, give credit where credit is due. He's been playing pretty well, despite the fact that we wrote him off before the season.
You could do worse. Okay, speaking of writing players off, let's do some take poker here. Through 2 weeks, which is one of your off-season flag plants that you are ready to just fold and give up on right now?
Wow, this is a tough one off the top of my head. I mean, the JJ McCarthy one is very easy to come back on that one, but that also is based around a very bold prediction. So I feel like that one's
that's a bold prediction. Doesn't count.
That one was a little bit, a little bit overblown. Man, you know what? And I don't want to spoil too much, but Dalton Kincaid, I don't think it's happening for Dalton Kincaid. I am very worried about Dalton Kincaid just being another guy who's like a contributor in an offense and not somebody that is ever going to emerge as a true tight end one. But I say that, and he's probably going to go out on Thursday night and score 2 touchdowns and blow up.
Okay, don't be ridiculous. No, we know that didn't happen, even though the game hasn't happened as we record this. All right, give me your next one here.
All right. Who is your favorite redraft stash at the moment?
Ooh, favorite redraft stash. Kind of like that Kendra Miller one that you suggested. And I would posit Luther Burden as one here too. Because I do like that Bears offense. I think it's been well constructed. It's been sloppy, but that's to be expected with the new coaching staff. And I really do think the odds that DJ Moore does not finish the season as a Chicago Bear are rather high. And despite the fact that everyone on fantasy Twitter wants him to take Olamide Zaccheaus' job, Luther Burden, he's not going to. I think he was drafted to replace DJ Moore, and I think it happens maybe sooner than later. So you probably can't stash him on like anything more than a deep league because it's just we're about to hit bye weeks here sooner than you think. But I think he's a good one to suggest.
I think that's a great call.
All right. Is it over for Bryce Young?
No, I don't think it's over. Based on what we saw in the second half of last season.
Are you sure?
Have you
seen the offensive line?
The offensive line is not been good. I get it. But we saw last year the offensive line playing well enough that he was able to come through. So let's hope with our guy Jalen Coker eventually coming back that maybe this offense can hit some sort of other level eventually. I'm not going to write him off after 2 weeks based on what we saw down the stretch last season, but it's certainly concerning that he's kind of regressed back to the Bryce Young and a lot more what he looked like as a rookie, where he was kind of scrambling for his life and not really playing comfortably out there.
All right, I think we've got time for maybe one more piece, but certainly one more from you here, Boone. Hit me on this one.
All right. A genie grants you one wish and one wish only. You can take over as the GM of any NFL franchise. All things considered, you have to take everything into account. Which team would you choose to be their GM?
Wow.
It is a thinker. It is one that you clearly want to get right. You don't want to pick the wrong one here. The genie only gives you one wish.
I think, one wish. I think I'm going to pick... I think I'm going to pick I think I'm going to pick the Saints. They need it. They need the help. I think I can rebuild the team. And also, by the way, I got to think from a personal standpoint, where would I like to live? I don't know that I would love to live in New Orleans, but I'm probably going to get fired. I mean, I would love to live there for a short amount of time, not forever. I'm going to get fired in 5 years anyways. I might as well have like a good, fun 5 years in New Orleans.
I've been to New Orleans many times, and that would be a fantastic place to live. That's a great call.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, I've been as well. It's always been fun. Again, don't know if I could be there forever, but a nice little 5-year stint. I think I would enjoy myself there. All right, Boone, hell of a show, buddy. That is going to do it for us here. Make sure you're checking out all of Boone's content on the website because, as I say all the time, we are reading again in 2025. That is going to do it for this show. But important to note, for those of you busy in the YouTube chat with specific questions, we have the show for you every Friday. John Daigle hosts a live Q&A on this YouTube channel. Look at Daigle. Handsome as hell. Look at that beard. Look at the eyes. There's knowledge in those eyes. Okay, so 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. He's here for you. Subscribe to the channel and check out that. I mean, come on, man. You want to watch something that doesn't have Matt Harmon on it. So please, for God's sake, subscribe and check out Daigle's Q&A if you have specific questions. This show will be back on Sunday for our recap show with Chris Allen. We're going to be live as soon as the late game windows end. So Bears, Cowboys, when that hit 000, be right here on YouTube to recap all of that. Until then, we're out.